Everybody say it mean.
Who's that out there living the dream? Let's blow in the bean. Who's that still smoking all that green? Let's blow in the bean. Come on y'all, let me hear you scream. Let's blow in the bean. Let's blow in the bean. Let's blow in the bean. Go.
Everybody say it mean.
Who's that out there living the dream? Let's blow in the bean. Who's that still smoking all that green? Let's blow in the bean. Come on y'all, let me hear you scream. Let's blow in the bean. Let's blow in the bean. Let's blow in the bean. Go.
How's it going, everyone? Hoping you had a great weekend. I know I did. It was definitely a good card. People have been shitting on it, but around here we don't tend to think too many cards are bad unless they really, really suck. But we had finishes, submissions, knockouts, lot of prospects. I was just really surprised as the week's gone on, as people have kind of been shitting on that, calling it the worst card they could have put on coming back from a hiatus of fights. How do you feel about this weekend's post-fight?
Well, the weirdest part to me is that everyone keeps saying, oh, look at first thing back from McGregor Mayweather, UFC puts on this card.
This
first
show.
Thing back, boxing's putting on Triple G.
Canelo.
Yeah, guess what? UFC is going to have like 4 fights in between now and the next time you see them fight. It's apples and oranges.
Agreed.
They're two totally different sports. And then guess what? After Triple G and Canelo fight, can you name the next 2 boxers that are going to fight when?
Good fucking call.
I can tell you 2 fights on the next cards coming all the way out into November or December.
Agreed.
So I feel like UFC, apples and oranges. Sometimes there has to be cards like UFC Rotterdam, so we appreciate cards like UFC 215.
Oh man, what a stack card we got coming up that we're going to definitely break down later. But some of just the highlights. We're not going to go into the entire post-fight, but Zabit was a good play. He ended up getting a finish. I know a lot of people are big on this guy. He was doing a lot of really flashy stuff. He did the Showtime kick, which I always absolutely love, but all of that spinning shit against high caliber guys that shoot on your legs are going to control you. Santiago also being a debuter in the UFC also helped, I think, Zabit look a little bit better, but I think people are jumping the shark a little bit on him. I heard people saying all sorts of crazy stuff, and it didn't make sense to me. I'm just like, you look good against Santiago and a lot of other fighters, but get a real top 10 contender in there. And that spinning stuff, it doesn't work. It's because it exposes your back when you don't need it to be exposed. And a good guy will shoot on your ass, and then all of a sudden he's got top control on you very quickly. That was a fun fight. How'd you feel about that fight? Did you end up catching it?
Yeah, it was kind of, for the caliber of the fighters that it was, I mean, he still has fights left in him for that caliber
ton of
guy.
fights I want to watch.
But to me, the real story of the night was anyone with the last name that ends in OV. If their name ended in OV, they had a killer night at UFC Rotterdam.
The only underdog that came through all night long was Gowdy. Everybody else was a favorite.
Yeah, there was not really much money to be made on this card.
Yeah,
I think a lot of people broke even.
Unless you were picking those prop bets and calling like the way the fight would end. And those are tough to hit. But either way, I had a pretty good DK. I still feel like with our Prezeris pick, that was on the money all day. That was an easy fight, especially after weigh-ins, him coming in so heavy. Also with
our Leslie Smith Underdog Pick, but Brian Barberena, he looked good and he almost had him.
He, in the second round, that uppercut had
against that Leon Edwards.
Edwards all sorts of wobbled. He hit him with a disgusting left uppercut underneath the armpit. Edwards didn't see it coming, and I was really surprised that Edwards actually came back, and he earned that win because I do think that Edwards eked out 2-1 with just the wrestling.
I agree, but I believe Barberina got about 35 points, and
which was still a money play.
Still worth
that
being
cashed
an
me in a lot of
pick.
games. That cashed a lot of my DK plays.
I
definitely.
agree. It was having him at that 7-2 allowed me to put some Labovs on there.
With Barberina, as far as DK goes, I feel like he's still going to be a good play from here on out because he proved that you're not going to finish him anytime soon. So he's going to be in 3-rounders where he has a lot of movement. He outstruck Edwards by a lot, but he was in controlled a lot of that time, and he lost a decision in control, not in a fight, because the person that was getting hurt by far in there was Edwards. Barberina was just eating every single one of his shots, and Edwards does tend to hit a bit harder than most people. Hopefully Barberina doesn't stick with that tactic for too long, because eventually that chin starts to go. Doesn't matter who you are. It's not the best game plan to just be like, okay, hit me twice, I'm going to try to get a takedown.
They could have stopped Marion Renew's fight a little sooner.
I would agree with that 100%. Totally outmatched.
She had a 3rd round knockout.
Right. It was that Olivia, her takedowns though, did you see how good her fucking takedowns were? I really was impressed. Even when she was not getting them, she was coming back in, and it was just, she has a fast shot for anybody. I think she's going to go way further in this division. That's somebody off of this card that lost that I might put an eye out on her. Week and a half, she went into the 3rd round and at times was winning that fight.
See, I totally disagree because I think Marion Renew is over the hill. And beating Marion Renew is not, it's like meh, or losing to Marion Renew. Yeah. It's like you lost to Marion Renew.
I feel like against other people, we'll see. We'll see how it goes. That's what's fun fight about.
Who's lower than Marion Renew in the 135?
Jessica I.
She's a 125er now.
Oh, right. What about Leslie Smith?
No way.
No, sorry.
No way!
Evan Smith.
How dare you?
Evan Smith. Who's that Carp Evan Smith girl? I think she's actually coming up on this coming up card.
Ashley Evan Smith?
Ashley Evan Smith. There you go. A lot of Smiths. I would say she's in that caliber potentially, which, hint, hint, foreshadowing later on the card.
You guys are excited for an Ashley Evan Smith fight against the girl we can't remember her name.
But that Struve fight, Struve looked good for the 1st round, but that gas tank that skyscraper ran on empty going into the first 3 minutes of that fight.
I was surprised at how much damage he ate before he got knocked out. And I agree with you. I thought 1st round he was looking killer until the end of that.
He looked like a monster.
I couldn't believe how much damage
Volkov took. Yeah. That cut under his eye was brutski.
And he took some crazy head kicks. I can't believe how quick and heavy Struve gets that leg up there. Just like a thud.
Right. He's lived by the sword, died by the sword, which I love about Struve. I don't know where
Struve goes from here. I do like all the chatter about Volkov fighting our boy, the Predator.
I like that fight because that's a real test.
It's a test for both of them.
Yeah, agreed.
And I think it makes more sense
Volkov
for the crawl up.
So much more experience, but everything I've been hearing is Ngannou's been doing all of the right training in Vegas, just jumping from gym to gym and living at the UFC complex.
I love Francis Ngannou.
I know.
Anyone that thinks he's overrated, they're wrong. They're looking at the next champion.
I just feel like with like a Rose, he's just a ball of potential, and that potential could be through the roof and it could flop. The fun is seeing what happens because everything's there. It's just whether all of the stars align, and he has it because I feel like he is getting pretty good at the social media. Like he's been in my social media stream every single week for one reason or another, and it's just because Francis Ngannou's in the house, which is good for him. Like that's tickets.
I like it. I'm enjoying it. Yeah, every time Hybert's fighting is retweeting some of that Ngannou info. We always try to retweet it on our page.
Right.
At Lesbo and the Bean on Twitter. And speaking of at Hybert's fighting on Twitter, our other boy. Since when did we started calling people our boy?
Because I hate it. Because I talked about it once, saying I hate when it's like, oh, it's your boy.
Our goddamn Newt.
Yeah.
Cavassier. Yeah.
From Alpaca Thesaurus. You turned me onto this page. You
we talked about it on
recommended it, and I watched it. It's smart. It's a different path, which is better than Robin Black sometimes.
Well, I feel like how many times can we break down a fight physically.
Yeah.
And so it's really interesting to me, Mind Smash, the Alpaca Thesaurus, a couple of these people are taking the mental aspect of seeing things. So at Highbirds Fighting, the Beans Twitter, you can follow him there. Ask the Alpaca Thesaurus, what does he think about the Nate Diaz, Brennan Schaub confrontation backstage at Mayweather McGregor? And the Alpaca Thesaurus made a whole episode about it.
That's a good question.
And answered him. It was a good question, and it made it interesting for me. I liked all the angles of it, and it changed my whole opinion on what I thought.
I thought the same thing. I initially thought, like, of course Schaub is being the guy who's in the right here because he's just trying to help it, and the whole time.
But then when you broke down the body language,
yeah, it changed my whole point of view.
And you see him touch him right in the chest. Like that moment, and how he was crowding his space.
Right, and even Diaz when he's talking about the hand movements of the placing, because I could see that being like, I'm giving you, we're seeing it different ways. Like, I could see how Diaz was speaking with his body as much as his words, or not so much his words and more his body. I liked it. It was fun. It was fun to get a shout out there in the MMA verse.
Yeah, you guys check it out. Get onto it early so you can say to your friends you told them about the Alpaca Thesaurus. I think it's one of those, to me, it's a totally different way. It's still the cartoon drawing, but it's totally different than Tommy Toehold. Totally different view on what's going on in the fight game. So I don't think it changes anything. And there's so many shows right now, and I'm actually going to stop following a lot of them that are just cutting and pasting pretty much shit I read on Twitter and other people's work, and then putting it together in a 3-minute short clip behind doom, 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 and they just talk about MMA shit.
Yep.
Put a little work into it, people. Start a podcast. Do what these people are doing with an animation. Do something. Don't just cut and paste.
I do think that Cavassier did spur my interest a little bit in being like, there is quite a few MMA podcasts. Like, so how are we going to keep distinguishing ourselves from any other one? Because not that we're not bringing people new news, but it's been said a couple times by the time we get to you at points. And it's our breakdowns that I think are definitely getting us where we need to be, because they're good breakdowns. I'll listen to them.
Yeah, we're going to try to get on YouTube, but there's a lot of fights. I hear every podcast talk about the same 5 fights, and I listen to every MMA podcast that's out there, and if it's good, other ones I fall off of, and I'll talk shit on them. I don't listen to Unfiltered. I don't want contrived friendship put together on air. I never listened to it in my talk radio before I was into MMA. I don't want it now.
What about the Snoopcast? I fell off after the first day.
Don't give me a celebrity in this. Give me a super fan. It's what it's kind of, it's why I still listen to the Big Brown Breakdown. I don't listen to Brian Callen's show separately. I want the Big Brown Breakdown just because he's talking about fighting, and I don't care. I hate this new word of analysis and everyone calling everyone else a bullshit analysis. I think, to me, I want to hear fuck analysis. If I want to get just a fight analysis, I'm going to watch Tom Hardy. If I want to get just a breakdown of movement for my naive head and I need somebody to tell me what moves are called so I can explain them on air later, I'm going to watch Tom Hardy. I'm going to listen to Dominic Cruz. I'm going to listen to Joe. I'm going to listen to you. I'm not going to... Everybody else, I want their feeling on the fight. I want to know the way they feel on it. I want to know how excited they are about it. And Brennan always acts like he's big Hollywood, so he's not going to talk about any of the fights unless it's a name he knows. And half the names he, in quotes, knows, he can't even fucking pronounce right. He's still calling Gano for Francis Ngannou.
Yeah.
And I'm like, how do you have an MMA podcast and can't... And I understand we have problems with Russian names and we have problems with the whole... I'm going to work... When we're doing the breakdown...
And once I hear it on TV,
we're going to work on it.
I'm going to try to get that right. It's not Edliov, it's Edlov.
Yeah, I'm going to work on it.
All right. I know. Now I know. It wasn't that I was coming out of left field and trying to be an asshole on that. But, yeah. We working to bring it at you guys, so hopefully you appreciate it. But
hopefully we're on YouTube soon.
Yep, and definitely feel free to interact with us at that.
Speaking of keeping you up to date, you guys, if you're loyal listeners or regular listeners or even people that despise us but tune in once in a while, you know we're in Florida and we got some shit bearing down at our back door here, people.
Yeah, I think we're doing this show more to just keep our minds busy instead of just because it's nighttime and it's just like, woo, getting ready.
Hurricane Irma.
We got a big one coming.
You guys, so if for whatever reason, we don't come to you one week, or it comes to you weird, or the sound quality sounds off in the next few episodes, we might be sitting at a Dunkin' Donuts using some free Wi-Fi, coming at you live.
Right. Or we might be ankles deep in water, drying out.
Yeah, we might just be sitting on a roof, waiting for a helicopter,
This
coming
is
at you
the
live.
truth. Late breaking.
Yeah, you might be able to follow Leslie and the Bean on Periscope, waiting
That's a
on their
good call.
helicopter.
That's a good call. We might end up doing some of that
Yeah,
action
who knows
footage.
what's going to happen while we're bored during storm with no power.
Yeah, Cat 5. I mean, already recorded the most powerful hurricane this century or something like that. It's just...
Ever in the Atlantic that I know none of in my lifetime.
And so I'm fairly new Floridian, only been here a few years, but...
Speaking of, the Bean's an Oregonian or Californian, but then moved to Oregon,
Yeah, as a
raised
kid.
there. Oregon's on fire.
Yep.
California's on fire.
So I can't go home.
Maybe you're Jon Snow. It's like the battle of fire and wind.
I'm always hot when I sleep.
Oh, shit. Rhaegar.
So, other news in the MMA verse, there's been so much going on with the bad P test, with fights being, what's the top thing? Derek Lewis has been doing an amazing job, speaking of catastrophes, where his house hasn't even been in danger, and he just goes out looking to people to pick up. That's an American being an American, and
Derek
just
the
getting
Beast
it done.
Lewis,
Yep,
big ass
follow him.
truck in Houston during Harvey, rescuing like about 100 people a day.
We calling for you, Derek Lewis. We're gonna need you in like 3 days.
Yeah, Derek Lewis.
Derek Lewis, come with your truck. We gonna need you in Florida.
Follow us on Twitter at Lesbo and the Bean, and we'll give you updates on our location.
And now we're watching the fights because it's gonna get here on that fight day. On that fight day, where we might have a little. I got the generator already in the back going. We got extra connections hooked up. It's gonna be
I think it's
pay-per-view.
going to be a few days after fight. I think we're going to make it through fights.
Perfect.
And then Sunday.
Perfect.
I think we might get a small tropical storm during fights, but hopefully with power
I can
can
deal with that.
withstand.
I can deal with that.
Because you know I got to see my girl,
Ooh.
Bullet Valentina Shevchenko. Hopefully somebody can make weight.
I was about to say, hopefully somebody just feels good because apparently a tummy ache.
No sinusitis.
Oh, sinus, right. And have you seen lately that she's, Amanda Nunes, we're talking about here, has openly said, like, she feels that Dana is punishing her by not having her be the main event? She openly said that. And it's just like,
it's not a punishment. It's because I can't bank on
Trust
you.
you. Can't trust you, girl.
It's all, I have to be able to bank on you. And I also have seen Valentina Shevchenko in a few interviews saying, I do not believe it was cyanitis. I believe
I love
that
it.
she could not cut weight in time and she felt weak. And so now she had to go home and go on a diet. You are not champion.
I love it,
You
girl, because
cannot
that's
call
the
in
truth.
sick. A champion does not call in
That's
sick.
the truth, though. And that's the line that I kept seeing from Valentina. And that is the most honest. It doesn't, and any other champion in any other weight division will be like, doesn't matter. When they sign the check for you to be there that day at that night, doesn't matter if you had to get an IV the night before. Now that IVs are illegal, but back in the day, that was all the money you were getting. That's why you're there, to fight.
How many champions have you heard now that fought with torn rotator cuffs,
Non-fucking
torn
stop.
knees, broken
Then
hands?
not even
yeah.
champions. These are just guys that are like, I came in with a rib injury, and they're on the undercard. Because they're just like, I need to keep fighting, guys. This is the way I make my moolah. I can't just sit on this belt, which we're in a weird place with everything that's been going on as far as MMA and what type of fights have been going, people getting popped. It's not going to get any better. It's going to
And
get worse.
honestly, and I'm not trying to be a dick to Amanda Nunes, but I'm about to be a dick to Amanda Nunes. I have an issue. Everyone talks shit about Conor not defending, but Michael Bisping's defended his belt once to Dan Henderson. No one gives him shit. Could the same be said? Amanda Nunes has only defended her belt once to Ronda fucking Rousey.
And Misha after.
I thought
Wasn't
she
it?
beat Misha for it.
Oh, yeah, she did took it. Yeah. So she's only defended once
She
against.
only defends
yeah, that's right.
So, and to me, I would put Dan Henderson and Ronda Rousey not like on the same par for their division of fighter. Like, nothing against them, but they're not the number one contender in their division.
I would totally agree. And did you see all of the Ronda WWE chatter?
Good for her. Get out.
She's not gonna.
It's
Hopefully,
not
she
going to
doesn't
save
fight
your
again.
body, but hopefully it saves your brain a little bit.
Good call. And she's going to be able to still make multi-millions because she can transfer all those Metro PCS contracts into a physical, like, no, you have to pay me this much if you want me to work for you.
She'll make tons
Where
of
in the
cash.
UFC she can't because with a losing record.
She knows she can beat every woman for real in the UFC. Or in the WWE.
But it's a show. It's a script.
Oh, I know
so,
it's all script,
yeah.
but I just mean the fans kind of know that too. Even fans that kind of think it's real, they're like Ronda. So I feel like she'll be a main character pretty quickly, which gives her more money, and then she'll, and hopefully, a lot of the wrestlers get some acting experience, and maybe it'll help her carry on for life after fighting.
Right, or after entertaining or what, not
Yeah.
even entertainment, but this physical entertainment, because we do know that WWE world, even though it's scripted, there's a lot of injuries. It's definitely a hard job to have. Like, it's not for the faint of heart by any means
The bigger
whatsoever.
Ronda gets, the more it helps mixed martial arts. And Ronda will always have a place on women's MMA because without
Agreed.
her, who would have been the girl to break through? Like Misha's decision record. Because like Misha had everything but the skill set at the time. She had the look, she had the personality.
Misha Tate is the Daniel Cormier of the 205 division. At that time,
that
she
time.
was that.
At
At
that
that time, she was the 205.
I agree.
The
I
Cormier of
agree.
it.
And then would Holly Holmes be like the Anthony Johnson? Like
No, because she doesn't have the knockout power.
Well, that's the only two things she won. Two
It's
knockouts.
2 knockouts. It's only 2 knockouts. She's
That's it.
like, she's had 3 ever.
That's all her whole thing. Holly Holmes, 2 knockouts. They just happen to be
And then the other 20 fights, you don't think.
the MMA's most loved female fighter and the MMA's most hated female fighter.
I don't know.
Okay,
I
what do you
feel
think
like-
of this real quick? Brendan Schaub always says, if Holly Holmes fights Cyborg and wins, she's the best pound-for-pound women's fighter of all time. What do you feel on that?
I do not agree with
I
that.
agree with you.
Yeah.
I don't agree with him at all on it. I don't.
It doesn't just transfer like that because time and eras and points of where the sport are make it what it is. And there's going to be champions that are going to make these initial champions look like chumps because that's the way it evolves. But Rocky Marciano will be the best boxer for his time frame. I agree that guy's going to... But if you put him in there with Mike Tyson, guess who I'm fucking picking? And saying the best stuff.
Yeah.
But Tyson in his time, and eventually he weaned out. So in that time frame, she keeps it. That's when the change, or that's when the the titles turned, and you saw a new coming of guard. But yeah,
And we're about to get into a new changing of the guard, but we can talk about that when we get there, unless there's some other MMA news. There's so much MMA news.
There has been so much MMA news, but I think we're ready for the breakdown.
And
give
we
it to you
might
while we still
be
can.
off our jobs with nothing else to do to kill time while we wait for a storm. So we
there
might
might
be
be
giving a
extra
bonus
plug-in?
episode
Oh.
this week. So we could save some news and just go right into UFC 215.
This is gonna be, where's this gonna be at? It's Johnson Borg pay-per-view. Gonna be shown on Fight Pass, Fox, and pay-per-view. How many bouts do we have on the main card? It looks like we got 5 bouts, and this is gonna be 12 fights total. I am incredibly excited. Co-main event is Amanda Nunes, Shevchenko, Demetrius Johnson, Ray Borg being the main event. But let's start from the bottom up. We have
Honestly, though,
Uh-huh.
I have to say,
the real main event, the people's main event.
Shevchenko Nunes is going to be the ratings carrier for if it was between those two fights. But isn't the third fight of the card Thompson Mosfa? Or wait, that's
No,
later.
no,
in the,
no, no,
that's
that's later
the
in
third
the-
fight of the night's another good fight.
Yeah,
though.
oh,
Big
yeah,
guys.
yeah, yeah.
What's the third fight of the night?
It's LaTB, Tyson Pedro.
Oh, okay.
That's a fun fucking
The
board.
whole entire-
Jordy Stevens Melendez is another big one on there.
The whole ratings of this card, though, is on the backs of Nunes from Brazil and Shevchenko's Russian influence. That is where the ratings are coming from.
Mm-hmm.
They can't. They put Johnson out of because he's going to break a record, and so it's the only way they can get people to really fucking care. Is the sad fucking truth of it. Half the people I'm watching break it down, everyone's like, I don't even know Borg.
That's nuts. That's absolutely nuts. Because Borg has been a contender, but Borg needs at least 5 or 6 fights before he gets to Johnson, maybe, or like 3 or 4 more fights. But yeah, he hasn't been in the UFC long enough. But DJ, it's a testament to DJ. He's already cleared the division once. Like, they're just like, okay, well, here's just a fresh matchup because everyone else he beats. So, starting from the bottom up, we have a bout at lightweight, 155 pounds, Cajun Johnson versus Adriano Martins. Cajun Johnson is the older fighter, or the younger fighter by a year, being 33 years old. Martins being 34. There's not really much of discrepancy in height, 5'11 to 5'10 for Martins, and 2-inch reach advantage for Cajun Johnson. Johnson is 21-12, coming off a 2-fight winning streak against Nakayami Koyami and Li Pin Zhang. So he likes to go to China and beat those Chinese fighters, which tell you the caliber of those fighters. They come to America. Prior to that, he lost to Tai Young Bang and a TKO, and that was 3 years ago. Johnson does tend to be injury prone, and he's a really good athlete, all around a good fighter, but he can be controlled a bit in the wrestling. And Adriano Martins is definitely a heavy hitter. Both guys can crack, but I am going to give the power to Martins. Martins losing to Leonardo Santos in a split decision, I could have went either way, and I wouldn't have been upset. I think I did have Martins on that, but that's the way it goes. Martins, prior to that, had a TKO finish over Makhachev, and we talk about them Russian fighters. Anybody to get a knockout over a Russian fighter, he was an underdog in that, and he definitely put it to him. He had a winning streak in there, and I think Martins has a last run left in him, and then he's going to be, with his age, and he's been in it for a long time. I just don't see him going too much longer in the sport. But some of those Brazilian fighters go to the 40, 39 with freaking who knows what they're drinking out there. But Martins lands in that category.
You said this fight was in Edmonton, Canada? Where? Where's Edmonton? Virginia?
Canada.
Yep. Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
This is a Canadian card. With Martins, I just feel like he on the ground is better specifically. The only place I really see Johnson winning is in transitions, so striking into a takedown more. But I feel like Martins takedown defense is going to be able to keep it standing. If it goes to the ground, he wins. He just has better base control positions. I see Martins getting a decision here. I do think the power is going to play a role, and I can even see a knockout just because I think Johnson's caliber of fighter has been so much lower, and I think Martins is going to end up going on his last little run, and if he gets a loss anytime in here, he might be retiring not too far from now. How do you feel this one's going to go down?
I have Martin's decision on this as well. I'm going to stay away from this fight all day because it's the Lesbo and the Bean rule, first fight of the night.
Oh, good call. I'm getting ahead of myself.
But what I remember of Johnson, he just looks like a pipsqueak in the ring. He looks teeny, and I think Martins is a grinder. He's not going to be able to take him down at all. So I do agree with you exactly. It's going to be a decision, 2 rounds to 1. If he takes a rest round in the middle or skates through 3 because he knows he has it. But I could see him knocking him out if Johnson thinks he's going to keep coming forward and trying for dumb takedowns. If he tries for stupid takedowns, he's going to get knocked out. Otherwise, I see it going to decision. So that is what I have as well. And who knows, I say to stay away from the first fight of the night all the time, but I usually put it on 1 if Martins is cheap. I don't see him being cheap. So if he's too expensive, stay far away.
Yeah, I think he's going to probably end up being the favorite there. So, moving on to the next fight, we coming in with a heavyweight bout. 265 pounds, Luis Henrique versus debuter Arjan Balura.
Luis Henrique versus Arjan Balar.
Balar looks like he's coming in undefeated from British Columbia, him being a local boy. Looks like he's got some Olympic wrestling singlet in there. We know that Luis Henrique at 6'1" is coming off of being the Brazilian state heavyweight champion and representing Brazil in tournaments. The age is going to be a big difference, favoring Luis Henrique being 23 years old to the debuter's 31 years old. This is a wrestler versus a wrestler at heavyweight. Henrique has had 4 or 5 fights in the UFC now, so the caliber is definitely going to be there, but we've traditionally seen that wrestlers in general tend to transfer the best over in their first few fights in the UFC because they can always fall back on that wrestling. And if I was to give any matchup in the world, if it was Brazil versus Canada in wrestling, I'd pick Canada all day. So I feel like the wrestling is going to go to Balur. And I feel like He has good takedowns, good athleticism. At heavyweight, his fights look like he took over the position really quickly. Henrique is going to put up a fight. I think this could go into the round 2, but I just feel like this 31-year-old wrestler out of Canada is going to be a hometown favorite for a reason, and he's going to get a TKO round 1 or 2 for the debuter. I don't know if he's going to be the favorite or not. I feel like he's not. I feel like Henrique should get this just because he has the experience in the UFC. How do you see it going down?
I know right now it looks like Bilar is the heavy favorite, which that seems crazy to me. But I think people are looking at the 6-0 record versus Henrique's record with the 2 losses. Henrique to Burra losing to an ugly punch and the other to Ngannou, I feel like almost doesn't count. Here, when I look at it, I just think UFC experience all day. I don't care that you're a hometown favorite. In 31 is prime, and I think wrestling is great, but Henrique's only danger to me is getting knocked out. I don't see this guy knocking him out. When you look at the other people he's knocked out, they fought 1 or 2 times.
They came straight out.
They're nobody. They're nobody. Henrique have to have more experience than that at this point. He doesn't have any octagon jitters. I have to think that he's taken enough time in between his last fight. I don't see him getting knocked out here. I see him midden Henrique at the end of round 2, or submission for Henrique at the end of round 2, because I see Bilar getting tired. And that is the number one reason. And not that Henrique has a great gas tank, but usually it shits out in the third.
He knows. And also, he's been in the UFC ring enough to know where it's a good call with the debut fighter.
I just don't like 6-0 for a 31-year-old guy. That's not enough fights for 31 to me.
Yeah. I think I might move that to a decision.
And round
I think
number
it's gonna
4,
be a position fight. I
number
think this is
4
going to be
wrestler,
2 fat guys rolling around. This isn't going to be an elite striking bout. This is going to be 2 fat guys rolling around for 15 minutes. I think I'm going to switch to the decision because that could sway me on a putting Bilar, and you're making good points. Henrique should have way more credit I'm giving in there. But I do see a decision. I do just see it turn into a wrestling match. So, moving on to the next fight. This is a doozy. This is a sneaky fight. We have Mitch Clark at lightweight versus Alex White. Both of these young men have been in it for a bit. Alex White being the taller fighter at 6 foot. Alex White also being the younger fighter at 28 years old over Mitch Clark. Mitch Clark has come off of a 2-fight losing streak, losing to Joseph Duffy via submission as of a year and a month ago. And then prior to that, he ended up losing to Michael Chiesa via decision. And then he actually has a beat Mitch Clark over Ally Aquinta, which was a huge upset. And then nobody's pretty much prior to that, people that are already out of the UFC. Alex White has definitely been fighting at least 6 or 7 fights in the UFC. And he's looked at best, or initially he looked like he wasn't going to go far, but he made a big change in his training camp, and since his boxing has looked on point. He's a heavy striker with straight punches, and his gas tank was initially why I didn't like him, but I came around once he showed me in the decision loss over Clay Collard. Even though he was getting beat in that, he wasn't quitting, and that usually tends to get me on somebody's side, that because they can pull out those knockout finishes in the 3rd round. And Alex White is that type of a fighter. Alex White, as of late, lost to Tony Martins in a decision, previous to that beating Adam Lobov, which I don't know if Artem Lobov is a real
UFC fighter.
Yeah, it really, it's tough. So that's his last win out of his last 4 fights. He has 2 losses prior to that, Alex White does, in a TKO to Lucas Martins and a decision loss to Clay Collard. I feel like Mitch Clark has also been prone to injury, but the gas tank and the striking, I'm going to give to Alex White. All the ground game, I'm going to give to Mitch Clark. Mitch Clark has okay takedowns, but Alex White's takedown defense has looked really, really good. If Clark can get Alex White down at all, I feel like Mitch Clark can grind it out to a decision and or submit him. But if that submission comes, it's going to be later in the rounds. But I could see this being a disgusting split for either fighter. This is going to be a really tough fight. It's hard for me to break down because I like so many aspects of both of these guys. But what I'm just trying to talk about is the advantages I see. And I think the ground game is going to benefit Clark if he can get White there. But we'll tell in the first minute. If he shoots sloppily and Alex White takes it down, Alex White wins this striking game all day. Decision, Mitch Clark, how do you feel?
I have decision Mitch Clark as well, but mine is a little different than yours. I'm not really impressed with Mitch Clark at all. He has okay hands. He wants to stand and fight, which I agree with you. He's going to try for a takedown, but at the level of what's he going to do when he gets there? Like, he's going to get takedown. What's he going to do when he gets there? I feel like Alex White is squirmy. Everything in me wants to pick Alex White. The reason I'm not here is because I think Luis Henrique is going to beat the hometown guy. And I think for entertainment purposes, to control the arena so all their hometown guys aren't losing and they're building up their pep toward the main card as they come in, I think this hometown guy wins. There's just, so I think almost like this fight stylistically is a give-me for Clark. Like, Clark should have this decision all day, even with the judges on his side. That's all the reason I'm giving it to him. I probably will not have this on anything. Yeah. This will be a fight I stay away from, clearer than the first fight on this card.
It's a hard fight. It really is a tough fight to
Neither fighter should be expensive.
Yeah, I agree. 8-1, 8-1.
Both fighters are card fillers at this point.
Good call. I think that there is other spots that are going to be much easier to pick than that. But this whole card is fun is because actually a lot of these fights are pretty close in my eyes. There's shots for both guys. Moving on to the next fight, we're going to the featherweight division at 145 pounds. Gavin Tucker versus Rick Glenn. Gavin Tucker has only once fought before in the UFC against Sam Sicilia. And Rick Glenn's got a couple under his belt, losing only to Evan Dunham and then winning a split decision over Philippe Nover. But with the size advantages and or disadvantages, we have Rick Glenn coming in at 6 foot against Tucker's 5'7". The older fighter also being Gavin Tucker at 31 years old to Rick Glenn's 28 years old. Tucker looked good in his last fight against Sam Sicilia, but he decisioned him, and I feel like Sam Sicilia, even though he's a fan favorite, he's teetering on that UFC contract.
Same can be said about Nover.
And I was going to say that too. I was going to say the exact same thing once Nover. But that Evan Dunham loss decision isn't a bad loss. And Dunham looked good in that fight. Tucker was definitely able to take the fight where he wanted to and control it. I feel like this is a coin flip of a fight for me, and I can break it down for days, but I don't feel like these guys are going far in the UFC either one of them. I don't know. I just see a lot of holes. Hopefully they both can show me a lot here. I'm going to go Tucker decision just because there's better fights to break down.
I got Tucker. I think he's going to KO this
finish
Glenn, and I think he's going to do it pretty quickly. He's also wearing the Canadian flag, so if it does go to decision, it's easy to put Tucker here. I think Tucker's an easy pick to put on your DraftKings cards, unless he's over 9,000. I think a cap for Tucker, if he's under 8-9, you put him on everything, in my opinion. I don't think Glenn has super huge knockout power. I'm not worried tons about his ground game. All of his fights seem to be splits. I mean, I guess you could look back somewhat time ago. And my guess is those were crawling up fights for the fight organization he was in back then. So Tucker, I just think for all the reasons, he's a big guy, Canadian big guy. Perfect. What's wrong with a knockout in the second round?
I might end up putting a couple more on Tucker on a couple DK cards.
Oh, there's your girl.
Ooh.
Ashley Evans.
Moving on to the next fight, we have a preliminary bout at bantamweight, 135 pounds, between Sarah Morris and Ashley Evans Smith. If you were listening any earlier, you might have a little precursor as to how I feel about Evan Smith. Even though now that I'm looking at her record, she has a loss to Vieira, but that was such a garbage loss. Like, she looks so bad in it that's why I feel like 4 months ago, like, her gas tank just looks so rough to me. She's only a 5-2 fighter, so her only 2 losses coming in the UFC. Evan Smith comes in with a wrestling background, being 30 years old, and also having a 1-inch reach or height advantage and half an inch reach advantage over Morris. This is as pretty even as you can get in a fight. Morris comes in off of a big break, and I feel like she had kids because she hasn't fought in 2 years, and I feel like she had kids, but she lost to her last fight a decision against Jessica Andrade, and look what Andrade has been doing as of late. And then previous to that, she beat Alexis Dufries, who's no longer in the UFC. And then prior to that, Juliana Pena on the show. She was also an Ultimate Fighter alum, also beating Peggy Morgan, which has also come to her own way in MMA. But Ashley Evans Smith's gas tank is horrible. Morris is going to eke it out a bit more. I just feel like I've heard Evan Smith say it before, like it gets to her, or she just comes out with, her hands look better as of last fight, but she has very low fighter IQ. I feel like when we're like, shoot, you got the shot, she decides to keep it striking, or when she could needs to keep striking, she shoots into a really bad shot. And I'm really just never been impressed with Evan Smith's wrestling as well, maybe because she doesn't take advantage as much as she should. And I feel like Morris can exploit that. Morris has good takedown defense, and on the ground, take her down all day. I do think that Evan Smith may have grown in this amount of time a bit more just in the competition levels, and the fact that she's been so much more active in the last 2 years. Morris hasn't. She hasn't been competing against the best. So Evan Smith can have the striking advantage here. If she has an advantage, it's going to be there potentially in the gas tank as well. But I'm thinking stay all away from this fight. This isn't going to be a high score anywhere. And this is going to be up on the cage. Women, they're going to be standing just switching.
She already beat Marion Reneau.
I saw that in a split decision.
Yeah,
exactly. In a split decision. Evan Smith's last fights are a loss to Vieira, who was a debuter. Then she beat Veronica Merdu, and then she beat Raquel Pennington. Or no, she beat Renault in a split decision, and then she lost to Raquel Pennington in submission, which is understandable. Pennington is right around that corner from a title shot in my eyes. But stay away on DK from this fight. There is nothing good going to come from this. Nothing good. How do you feel this is going to go down?
Exactly the same way I felt the Marion Reneau one was going to go down last week. I feel like it's going to be a late finish by Evan Smith because that's when you're going to see the experience kick in. I think Marias has been away from the sport for a little too long. We are seeing this woman's division not evolve as quickly as the 115, maybe not as 125, but evolving nonetheless. And I think Evan Smith is one of the women that has evolved with it as well. I think she has nasty elbows. Marias, though to me, her best fight would be that she fought Andrade. And I also think Jessica Andrade losing to her, normally I'd like to be like, well, you lost to a bulldog coming straight forward the whole time. Mm-hmm. But that's new Andrade. That's not the Andrade she fought back then.
Yeah, that's a good call.
Jessica Andrade before was somebody who you didn't even remember her name. But now I feel like now she's not the fighter she is now. And the reason she's the fighter she is now is because she fought for the last 2 years. And Evan Smith has too. I'm going to say a late finish here. I think at the end of round 2, or maybe the middle of round 3. It depends on whenever Morass gives up, but she will. She's going to have a busted nose. She's not going to be able to breathe. And I think she's going to, I could even say Evan Smith submission. I just don't think Evan Smith likes to finish like that. She'd rather KO a girl with ground and pound and submit her. So I'm going to change it to round 3.
Ooh.
I think Morass is gonna get saved with the belt at the end of round 2.
That's the fun thing about this whole card. All of these fights are gonna be splits. We're gonna be picking different fighters because I got some dogs and some. Woo! It's a fun night of fights, people. Hopefully the hurricane don't shut off my power.
No, it's not gonna. I'm not even allowing that thought to enter.
Exactly. Generator, come on. Amazon wish list. Get on Let's Blow on the Beat on Twitter. Get on that wish list. Send us a generator.
Yeah, that's what we need to do is make a Lesbian the Bean wish list on Twitter.
Yeah.
Or wait, no, on Amazon.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, send me some glue sticks and some motherfucking generator.
Shit, I may set that up for us tonight.
So we can bring it at you live.
Yeah, you'll just won't even mind the buzz in the background.
Yeah,
I think though, but I've been looking into it, everyone. I think we can unplug and we might be able to get source from something else for power for microphones, or go back to old school microphone clips. Oh, we'll figure it out.
We will figure it out. Moving on to the next fight, though, we have a great bout at flyweight 125. We have Henry Cejudo versus Wilson Hayes. This is just a doozy of a fight. Both fighters, tons of experience in the UFC, both title contenders. these guys are going to be the 3-4, 2-3 again in the division against Demetrius Johnson. Demetrius Johnson is the John Jones without the drugs of this division. More so, he's going to be the pound for pound. He's going to break all sorts of records. But out of the two fighters, I would say Henry Cejudo put up less of a fight. I feel like Demetrius Johnson dispatched of Cejudo much more decisively than Wilson Hayes. And this stylistically is American wrestler versus a jiu-jitsu practitioner. We know that Cejudo really likes to come in with his boxing, with the size really quick and the age. We have Hayes being the older fighter, Cejudo being 30 years old, and we got an even height at 5'4", but Henry Cejudo has a 2.5 reach advantage at 67.5 to Wilson Hayes' 65 inches. We know what we're getting with both. Again, Cejudo with the wrestling, he likes to use the boxing and uses wrestling in reverse to keep it there. On the ground, Wilson Hayes has a submission ability, but we've traditionally seen that these American wrestlers can muscle their way out of a lot of positions. The striking advantage, that's where this fight's going to matter, because I feel like both fighters are going to want to keep it striking for two different reasons. Henry Cejudo, multiple times over, ends up getting in bouts. Even if he's losing striking, he refuses to use his takedowns. We haven't seen his Olympic-style wrestling because he doesn't ever use it. He uses his wrestling in reverse to try to turn it into a boxing because he's ultra confident in his boxing. He has some coaches that used to train Olympians and stuff, and I've said it a million times over. He's a wrestler who falls in love with his striking, gets away from what got him to the show, and starts losing decision after decision because he can take a punch, but he's never going to beat somebody who's been in that discipline for a far longer time. Wilson Hayes is a more diverse striker. Definitely not as good of a boxer, but and MMA-wise, you got Hayes throwing a lot more knees, head kicks, those MMA angles, but I don't think Cejudo's going to be surprised there. The takedown is never going to come for Hayes in this fight, so it's only if Henry Cejudo wants to get there will it happen, and if that happens, it's going to turn into a boring decision either way, but this has the potential for a flash knockout, but I think that it would come more from Hayes than Cejudo. I don't think Cejudo really has knockout ability. Cejudo only losing to Demetrius Johnson and Joseph Benavidez, who is the number 2 in the division. I mean, this is for the 3 and 4 spot in the division. This is a hell of a fight to be on the preliminaries. I'm really excited for this. I'm going to go with Hayes on the all-roundedness. I think Hayes is just American top, or he goes to American top team, but he's coming out of Dalia's Mixed Martial Arts Academy, but I know he has U.S. connections and stuff. He's the big underdog here at the plus 265, so decision, I could see why people are picking Cejudo because he's going to use the wrestling to be on top, and the people think he can dictate it. But I feel like Hayes is going to end up landing a couple hard shots and winning a disgusting split decision. Wilson Hayes, big underdog, coming in from the bean. How you feeling about this fight?
Leslie Smith Underdog Pick of the Week! Yeah, I have Hayes too, decision for all the reasons you said. And, I really liked Henry Cejudo a few years back, but I just think he is kind of one of these fighters that it just never delivers. He never delivers. Time, right? He never delivers, and he gives up on himself on the stool somewhere in the second round, third round.
But he's a lifelong competitor, and there's times where you're like, I'm doing a job and I'm competing, and I feel like Hayes is there to compete more. And we've seen Cejudo break. I think you're bringing up a wonderful point that I didn't.
I just think Hayes is a little tougher. He looked better in the Demetrius Johnson fight.
Mm-hmm. By far, right? I think
he has crisp hands. I think he has a better striking game. For all the same reasons. I think even if Cejudo ekes out the decision, Hayes with with reversals and with significant shots, I still think he's going to very eke, and I think he's going to be cheap as dirt. I think worst case scenario, it's similar as Barberina. Best case scenario, he knocks him out in like round 1 or 2. I think Hayes has heavier hands than Demetrius Johnson.
I'd agree with that. And that's where I was saying that I think Cejudo is going to be boxing with him and doing all that stuff. But Hayes is going to hit him a couple times, and Cejudo's game plan is going to change. And it never changes for the positive to try to get him the finish. It doesn't turn into, I'm going to knock this guy out before he finishes me. It turns into, I'm going to try to just win positions and decisions. And that's what Cejudo does. He wins decision fights because he goes into the point game instead of the finish, while Hayes will be like, he'll smell blood and go all day. And on the ground, he can get those reversals. I think his wrestling's underrated as well.
I guarantee you Cejudo's had 11 tests in the last X amount of months. How many has Hayes had? Just saying. Going from Brazil to Canada, I don't know what kind of testing exists in between.
Woo! That is a big one. I thought I was going to surprise you with that one. That one's a big underdog. That's a big one. A lot of people see that wrestling just holding him down, but I think Hayes is taking that next level up. Moving on to the next fight, we have a bantamweight bout in the women's division, 135 pounds. Sarah McMahon versus Ketel Vieira. Vieira is the younger fighter at 26 years old to McMahon's 36. We got a whole decade in between these ladies. McMahon coming in with the wrestling credentials, Olympian and whatnot. We also have McMahon being the shorter fighter at 5'6", giving up 2 inches to Vieira's 5'8", and the reach advantage goes to Vieira by 2 inches as well. Both of these women cut weight, even though there's a 2-inch discretion. McMahon is one of the most physically built women you will ever see. And if you talk to Joe Rogan will say, that's the first lady where when I touched her shoulder, it felt like a dude. So you didn't want to wrestle with her.
He said it felt like Dan Henderson.
Yeah, she's been wrestling. I mean, she's an Olympian for a reason. She's been wrestling for a long, long time. She definitely deserves those credentials. And I will say it immediately. I was the biggest naysayer of Sarah McMahon. I actually told multiple people, don't be betting on this lady. She gives up. And she did initially. But since those times that she gave up in the corner and you could see that she didn't want to fight, she's corrected her game plan, gotten on board, gotten her nutrition, looked like she had corrected a lot of her gassing problems. She really ended up having a bad gas tank, and that's why she would quit on herself, because she didn't have it in her. And with correcting that, I feel like Sarah McMahon has a line to the 135 title shot again against the new champion, not the same old Ronda Rousey hype train, an evolving champion in that division. So I really see a lot of prospect in Sarah McMahon. Vieira coming out off of a split decision win off of Ashley Evans Smith earlier. It was a decision, but it was a pretty close fight. That was 4 months ago. Prior to that, she beat Kelly Fashholtz in a split decision, and that was her debut in the UFC. So she's coming off a 2-fight winning streak in the UFC, but I think McMahon is a big step up now that McMahon's gotten her game plan under her. McMahon uses her wrestling actually pretty well and will control women on the ground, but she's now started to put in a lot more of those rabid punches on the ground that she never used to, and she just in general tends to be a little bit meaner, puts her head underneath her hands, and I feel like is just more confident in the ring. Vieira, it comes out hard the first round. She didn't have a good gas tank 4 months ago. I don't know if she's been changing that where she's coming out of Novo Uniao, so nope. It's going to be the same gas tank that she came in prior to. That's just kind of what they do. Big step up. Vieira has the striking advantage here, but McMahon's been in with just as elite strikers, and I feel like the wrestling is going to play into this. Like, if you've been listening to this, I'm going to say it. I like McMahon as a heavy favorite here, and she is, so that makes a lot of sense. I feel like McMahon gets a submission in round 3, gas tank finish. How do you feel?
I have McMahon submission round 3 as well for all the same reasons. I think Sarah McMahon has corrected every aspect of her game. She's one of the people, same exact as you. I was a naysayer. I was like, never put Sarah on a card.
She quit?
She quit.
You would see her quit.
But she's fixed that. She's a grinder. She's really come together. I think she has crisp striking. I actually think she looks really good there. I don't think she's too timid to stand up anymore with women and take a few on the chin. She does try to get it to the ground, which she does have better ground control now, not just because of her wrestling, but it looks like she's worked in some other submission moves in with her wrestling. I like her for all the same reasons I think Vieira gives up in round 3. Sarah McMahon, submission, round 3.
Woo.
And I'm going to put her all over my DK.
I think that's a good call as well. I think because of those takedowns.
And something else I've just noticed really lay out on this card, which you don't see happen in a lot of UFC cards anymore, but this is a testament to Canada fans. Their knowledge of any grinding sport, wrestling in particular.
I agree.
So you're noticing it with this card. Wrestling heavy all over it.
Because they understand the positions.
They're not going to get booed in Canada for
I totally agree. Speaking of the boos, did you end up seeing the fight where Diego Brandao, former UFC contender at 145, was fighting in Russia and ended up walking out of the ring?
No.
As of 2 days ago. Oh, it's been all over. One of the dirtiest fights you'll ever see. Brandao, Mike Tyson, he's on the ground, gets a shot taken out, or gets taken out by a shot, and he ends up biting the Russian guy, and then the Russian guy ends up headbutting him, and then like punching him after the ref tells him to like calm down and break, and then as he's backing up, Brandao kicks the Russian guy after the ref is like, okay, stand up both of you. He kicks him, and it is fucking insanity. Brandao gets up, quits. Brandao's biggest claim to fame was he won the UFC Brazil, like the first season, and he lost to Conor McGregor. He was one of the finishes of Conor McGregor. But he literally in the middle of the fight said, fuck this, I'm done. Asked them to open the cage. They wouldn't. Climbed over the cage, walked out. Fans in Russia started throwing trash into the ring.
Claim to fame, you're the first guy on the reel.
On the
on Conor's reel.
Yeah, right. That's really it. He got finished with a spinning head kick or something like that. It's that guy with the bald head. But he's fallen apart mentally. He always was a little bit loony. He's the type of guy who would Roberto Duran style tie a cat up and do all sorts of weird stuff. Not that that really happened, but I wouldn't be surprised if people in town said that kind of shit about Diego Brandao. He's just mentally shown that he's
shot.
Yeah, little weak. It gets to him. But moving on to the next fight, two guys that are not mentally shot. Two guys that are definitely hard-nosed Mexican fighters. They come at it. They always bring a fight. But they're both holding on to a contract. Like, this is make it or break it for either one of them, right?
I didn't know Jeremy Stevens was a Mexican fighter.
Yeah, he's Mexican. Yep.
They
coming out of, like, Arizona or New Mexico or something.
I don't know if it's make it or break it. I feel like Gilbert's built a big enough name. And I feel like Jeremy, all of his fights are exciting enough to still throw him in there if he wants to Bradley Pickett himself. If he wants to be one of those guys, I think the UFC would let him. He's gonna. It's never boring, and Gilbert's a company man, and he has a big enough name in the sport.
Yep.
I think Gilbert should retire after this.
Gilbert's 35 years old with a long career. He got in when he was early. He was in the Pride days. He was in Japan. People would say that he should have retired a while ago, but he's mounted somewhat of a career in the UFC, but he did come into it much later than people would have initially wanted for Gilbert Melendez. And it's just a shame that he didn't get the shine. He's coming off of a 3-fight losing streak against competitors like Anthony Pettis, submission, Eddie Alvarez, split decision, and Edson Barboza decision. Those are all top 3 contenders in any weight division in and around that weight. They're fighting at 145, but those were 155 guys. But those are top echelon fighters. So Gil Melendez isn't going in there against nothing but chumps. Jeremy Stevens is coming off of a 2-fight losing streak, losing to Rento Carnero in a split decision, and then prior to that to Frankie Edgar in a decision, which Carnero is definitely a guy who's definitely on the up, but that isn't the biggest loss in the world. Biggest fight as of late for Jeremy Stevens is a decision over Renan Barao, who's kind of been on the decline. So this is a Stevens lost to Max Holloway prior to that, and then he had a TKO over Dennis Bermudez 2 years ago via flying knee. So this is an 8-1, 8-1 for me on DK. I've been switching back and forth with these guys. I really don't like and have never liked Gil Melendez as striking. He's just been fairly rudimentary, really only favors that right hand, but he really is slow to bring it back in boxing stance. But Jeremy Stevens is not the best striker either. He's known as a knockout puncher, but I think he only has like 2 knockouts ever. Jeremy Stevens also just has a limited, though powerful, striking tech advantage. You wanted to say something. Go for it.
I was going to say the real hardest hitter at 145.
Jeremy Stevens?
Remember when he said, you know who the real hardest hitter is at 145?
Who the fuck is that guy? Yeah. And it's both of these guys have actually kind of a similar, because Jeremy Stephens also loads up on his shots and throws not as many or at more combinations than Gil Melendez, but that's because Gil Melendez doesn't throw many combinations either. The wrestling, I think, neutralizes each other. Gil will go for the shots more than Jeremy Stephens, and Stephens has good takedown defense. So does Gil if it comes that way. If Jeremy Stephens is smart, he'll actually come at Gil, because I don't think Gil will expect a wrestling attack from Stephens. Stephens traditionally turns it into a kickboxing match. I just feel like Melendez is on his way out more so than Jeremy Stephens, and this is going to give Jeremy Stephens another 3 or 4 fights, but I think Jeremy Stephens has also been found out. Him only being 31, it's not fair, but I just feel like I know Jeremy Stephens' style, and he hasn't been changing it other than he fixed his gas tank, but now he needs to change other stuff. With all that, Gil Melendez is just on the way out. He doesn't have more things to change. He did what a lot of guys do, where they move down and say, I'm down here now. Give me another fight. I'm going to be fine. And then look horrible there, because it was never about the weight cut. It's that your muscles and your body doesn't move the way it did when you were 20, because you're 35 with a long fight career, and you've had multiple injuries, and you've been caught for steroids. So I'm going to go Jeremy Stephens' decision. This is goodbye, Gil Melendez. Hopefully you step back and do some coaching. And Jeremy Stephens, I'm going to keep an eye on for next fights, because he's definitely going to have a tough road ahead. How do you feel this is going to go down?
Jeremy Stephens is only 31, and I have to think, even in this division, my question here is, for Jeremy Stephens to go on and be the best Jeremy Stephens, is it smarter if we start seeing maybe Jeremy Stephens at 155? Would he become a harder hitter at that range? But I do think there's still those questions to be asked about Jeremy Stephens. Mm-hmm. I still think he has exciting fights. If you want to say that he's been found out, whose game plan hasn't been found out other than Gil Melendez, who like the same thing over and over again? Yep. I think Jeremy Stephens is a fighter. He would fight for less money if to just still fight. I think he's that kind of guy. I wonder, Gil, what are you even doing in the octagon anymore? What are you still doing here right now?
Just keep it
I think this is way too much of a war than Gil should be walking into right now. I think if he were going to do this, he should be going against a fresh guy to welcome him to the UFC. I really don't need to see Gilbert Melendez in the ring anymore. I think this is going to be a battle for him. I think Jeremy Stephens could finish this fight, but right now I have Jeremy Stephens' decision, and it'll be an easy decision, and I will have him on a lot of DraftKings cards. He throws a lot of punches.
He does.
A lot of kicks. I think he's going to take apart Gilbert's lead leg, keep laying heavy hands. Hopefully he lucks out with one to KO him. I even think he can wobble him, though, and swarm him, which is a very Jeremy Stephens thing to do.
I'm liking that. That's a tough fight, but yeah.
Right now, I'm even
changing
it. TKO round 3. Stephens.
Definitely going to look out for weigh-ins. Moving on to the main card. Actually, Jeremy Stephens versus Gilbert Melendez was the opener for the main card, and that's a hell of an opener for a main card. Moving on in the main card, we have LaTB at light heavyweight versus Tyson Pedro. LaTB is definitely the more internet successful guy, being a 5'8" at 205 pounds to Tyson Pedro's 6'3". The reach advantage only goes to Pedro, and I say only by 4 inches is because LaTB being 5'8" and having 75-inch arms is gorilla arms. Those are monkey arms. He has got a hell of a reach, and it must be to steer his horse, because he has internet fame through, you've seen that picture, LaTB on the beach
on his beautiful horse
on his horse riding around. He's definitely more of the troll stature. LaTB being 34 years old, definitely been in the game, has multiple fights in the UFC, only losing to top contenders like Ryan Bader, who's now a Bellator fighter with a disgusting knee. You saw LaTB, a fire hydrant, fall over that day. That knee hit, and it was a pendulum. It was a perfect center. He looked like a twig, and he was night out cold. He was out for a while, too. It was a disgusting knee, and being 5'8", against most guys being 6 foot and above, I would have thought a lot of other guys would have been throwing those knees long ago in his career because it's just that much easier. I've just wrestled against taller guys like that. Their hips are already there. They just bring that knee up and it has power because they're 205. Pedro, coming off of UFC, winning the UFC RFA, having a great game plan with well-roundedness. His striking is not as developed as his ground game, but his striking is good because he has a well-developed ground game. He's definitely a contender at the 205 division. I feel like he has a good way to go. He won the show out of Australia against Khalil Roundtree by taking him down and submitting him, and he last beat Paul Craig via TKO as of 5 months ago. Pedro tends to like to take you down, beat you ground and pound, but he lands heavy strikes. I feel like Latifi has been a little found out potentially. They're both heavy hitters. Both of these guys hit hard. I feel like Latifi might come off a little gun shy after being that kind of KO'd, where he's seen that gift multiple times.
I agree so much.
I feel like Latifi's gonna come in and that hesitantness is gonna lose him the fight. And it rightfully so, because if somebody knocked me into next Tuesday,
here at
I
Lesbo
would
and
be
the Bean,
fucking
we
scared.
like to call that he was rousied.
Yeah,
You
it
can't
fucking
come
shakes
back
you.
sometimes
It
when you're
shakes you.
rousied.
And if Latifi comes back from this and looks fucking amazing, awesome.
Hats off. But
Right. And Latifi's ground game is where he likes to usually go. He usually gets on top of you and fucking just fire hydrants you into place.
And he doesn't want to go to the ground with this long, lanky mother.
Yeah, I feel like Pedro is just a craftier. It's a different type of a ground game, but Pedro is very effective in his ground game as well. The gas tank is going to be pretty even, but I am going to slight Pedro a little bit. He's just proven it time and time again, and the fight IQ goes to Pedro. I just liked all of his show. Anything I've seen of him, when you're like, oh, he should grab the wrist and pull the elbow in, he fucking does it every time. He uses his energy as best as he can. I just really think Tyson Pedro, 205 contender, very, very soon.
Agree all day.
And I'm going to have Pedro submission round 2. How you feeling about this
Exactly the same. Everything
Really?
you said, exactly
Oh,
the
shit.
same way. And I even think Pedro is somebody like, I think Ngannou Pedro is like our next couple of years. Like the future,
agreed.
they're going to be like the Overeem, Arlovsky, those kind of big names fight heavyweights that people always compare with and they put on everyone's lips. So yeah, Pedro submission round 2. I think Latifi's not going to want it. He's going to try to stand and throw with him at first, and I think Pedro's going to hurt him a little more than he thinks standing. So then he's going to try to get into a grind. Pedro has gnarly elbows, and he's a lot longer than people think. I could even see him going over Latifi's head and getting him a choke out from behind the neck standing and taking him down that way. So I don't know. I think Pedro submission round 2.
Woo, I like that. That's going to be money. I'm going to put money on that on my DK cards. If we're both this confident on it, feel good about that one, definitely. Moving on to the next fight at welterweight, we have Neil Magny versus Rafael Dos Anjos. This is a really interesting stylistic matchup. I'm going to say the well-roundedness goes to Rafael Dos Anjos being the former title holder at 155 pounds. I feel like moving up, where I usually criticize guys that move down to try to keep their career. When guys move up, I tend to give them a little bit more because now they might be getting fully nourished for the first time in a fight camp in a career of fighting. So I think that was a good move for Dos Anjos. Against Terry Saffiedine, Saffiedine is not an easy fight by any means whatsoever for anybody. And a decision in a striking bout like that, people are criticizing Dos Anjos. They thought that he should have finished that fight, and I think he played a good plan, and that's a testament to his fight IQ and his long career in the UFC. Dos Anjos coming off of his last win off of Saffiedine. Prior to that, only losing to Eddie Alvarez in a TKO where he had passed out the night before due to weight cutting, and Tony Ferguson in a decision in one of the fights of the year, funnest fights of the year in my eyes. Prior to that, beating Anthony Pettis.
So he lost to the champion.
Yeah, to the 2 and the number 1. And he also beat Donald Cerrone. Dos Anjos has Cerrone on his belt as well. Neil Magny is definitely coming in as the taller fighter at 6'3" compared to the 5'9" of Rafael Dos Anjos. Neil Magny also having a 9-inch reach advantage on Rafael Dos Anjos. Neil Magny actually uses his size better than most tall guys, and he didn't initially, but he's gotten with his camp and actually used his jab so much better and he's torn people apart with that jab. Legendary gas tank. I've actually made more money on Neil Magny than anything, but we were doing this earlier in the week just on our own time, and we were looking at records we have, and I have Neil Magny's number. I feel like I can call his bouts, win or lose. I've had a pretty good record with him, and Dos Anjos' gas tank against Saffiedine and other fighters as well is proven to me that Neil Magny isn't going to come with anything new. I definitely actually am lying because Neil Magny, I don't have his number at all. I'm 8-6 in picking Neil Magny. I'm not going to bullshit you guys. That's the fucking truth. I felt like maybe I'm thinking of another fighter. Maybe that hurricane fever's getting high. I just feel like I've won a few times. I had Magny in that Hendricks, but it was the gas tank why I had him against Hendricks in his last win. Neil Magny only losing to Lorenz Larkins in a vicious knockout where if you saw how to beat Neil Magny, kick that front leg. Kick the living shit out of that front leg. And Neil Magny is heavy on that front leg, but that's why he throws a good jab. And he really wins fights with tenacity and just forward pressure. He will lose the first 2 rounds and get a finish in the third, or he'll lose the first round and come back in the second too. I think Dos Anjos anywhere in this fight, though, does win. Even if they get to the ground, he has the ability to reverse it. The heavier puncher is Dos Anjos. I think Magny's tough enough to take the shots. And Dos Anjos isn't going to swarm him and gas like a lot of other fighters will. So I'm giving this decision. This is a really close fight either way. But the sure skill-wise, Dos Anjos it's just always that cardio and that will of Neil Magny. Puts him in advantageous positions. And the moderate favorite in Dos Anjos' decision. How you feel like this is going?
I have Dos Anjos' decision as well. I'm so interested to see him at 170 and hoping all the same things you do, that it's actually the weight cutting that's got to him at these.
He fought Saffiedine at 170.
For the last. And Saffiedine, to me, harder fight at 170 than Hendricks and Gastelum, who I love both as fighters, but fighting at 170, both look like garbage and both had problems making weight for the Neil Magny fights.
Yeah, good call.
I feel like he got 20% of both their purses.
Right.
So 2 guys that had heart weight cuts, even though I love both those fighters, if they were just clean wins without asterisks in my brains by them, I would give it to Magny. Something about that Lorenz Larkin fight was the first time that I really noticed it, and I felt like I saw a guy give up in the octagon with it was kind of brutal, but Larkin I felt like there was
living fucking shit out of him.
There was a lot of it that I just felt like I didn't like it. And so I'm going to go with Dos Anjos' decision for all the same reasons, and I actually thought that Neil Magny would be more of a favorite on this. I thought I'd be pulling in an underdog because of the records.
I agree, and I've seen actually online, there's been a lot of Twitter people coming in on Magny, but the lines haven't changed. Like, the betting lines haven't changed, but everybody on Twitter says they're betting on him, so it might be one of those that people are saying that and not really fucking betting it. Because that's a tough call for Magny. Dos Anjos, I could see more of if there's a bet to make, it would be that's how confident I am in it. But
I agree.
I think it's going to be a boring fight. I don't think it's going to be a barn burner by any means. I think it's going to go decision. So, moving on to the co-main event, we have the current title holder at bantamweight, 135 pounds, Amanda Leon Nunes versus Valentina Hot Sauce Shevchenko.
No!
Actually, it's Bullet. Hot Sauce Bullet, because you know that Valentina Hot Sauce. If you don't,
get yourself some.
You better go
get yourself some
to whatever grocery store you got in town, and you go to the ethnic food aisle right next to all those fake-ass taco shells, and there'll be a hot sauce called Valentina. You can get it hot in the black label or just yellow. Get both, because they're both good, and the hot isn't even hot.
Get yourself both. Put them on your tacos, delicious. Put them on your burritos, put them on your eggs.
Everything. Put them on your wraps before you fight. Do whatever you gotta do. Do whatever you gotta do.
Put it in your salsa.
So, we're definitely having a height advantage.
I don't know how many more times we could break down this fight. If
yeah,
you
true.
listen to Leslie Smith Underdog Pick,
True.
Unless something's changed.
Right.
I don't know how many times you have heard every way but Tuesday from the first fight to the last fight. I don't know how deep we have to go in it.
What then the angle that I should take instead
almost
of going
drooled
into
on
everything. The avenue should be more what has changed. What we know is that girl don't want to fight with Shevchenko, and even Shevchenko knows because she was saying initially as well, Shevchenko, and we've said it on our show before, she was saying, you know that samurai that shows up to a bout and then runs away 2-3 times in a row, and then the third time he actually is there to fight, and by that time his opponent is like, fuck, this guy's gonna run. He gets the leg up, and she felt like she's taking all of those considerations into mind, which makes her that much more of an advantageous position. And Shevchenko doesn't have to defend herself. Leon right now has to defend herself in every fucking interview she has because of her nasals being clogged. So it's definitely a fight that I think is already in Nunes' head. We saw what was going to happen after round 3 in their previous fight. I feel like this time only gave Shevchenko more time to get even more ready for this fight. Hopefully she's not hiding some sort of injury, because that's the only way I can see this really losing. I think 3 out of the 5 rounds, if not 4 out of the 5 rounds, go to Nunes. Shevchenko. Nunes maybe only wins 1, and it might be only the first just because Shev is a bit of a slow starter. You should have already known it. Shev, decision, if not TKO round 5, because Leon might give up and be like, well, my nose still hurt, but I went in there because people bullied me. And she'll totally have that fake-ass cop-out. How you feel this is going down?
We are hashtag Team Bullet all day, day here at Lesbo and the Bean. I have Shevchenko all day on this fight. I have Shevchenko decision right now because I just think Amanda Nunes has about 2 rounds of punch in her. That's what I think. Maybe a round and a half of punch in her. Mm-hmm. I think she has a nasty Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu game. I'm not worried about either of those things with Shevchenko. The where Shevchenko has been spending her camps, she has the samurai mindset. She has the Bruce Lee mindset. Everything you heard from Conor McGregor, everything you heard him in the Mayweather-McGregor fights talking about being like water and being a martial artist and being whatever, everything he says, Shevchenko really is. Bruce Lee says this one thing that really, when I think of Conor McGregor, is the one thing that doesn't make sense, and this is what makes a woman like Shevchenko the real deal to me. He says, your material possessions make you weaker. And that idea of, which I can totally see, minimalism is power. Right. And Shevchenko lives a minimalistic lifestyle. Oh, yeah. And she takes and she curates her life around her fighting, and her family curates their life around the sisters fighting. She is not only made to be the 135 champion, I think she could be the 125 champion. Woo! And I think she could beat Cyborg. I think Shevchenko all day on this fight.
Triple crown.
I think Shevchenko decision on this, but I could see if Shevchenko finished, because I don't know where Amanda Nunes' gas tank goes after round 3.
True.
I don't think she knows where it goes either. Yeah, I think she's planning on a quick knockout, and that's a big reason she was scared of this fight. I think she's going to have problems making weight again. I think she's going to go right back into a really bad place during weight cutting. Even though it's all going to go good this time, I think she's going to have less weight to cut. I think mentally she's going to wonder if her body's going to do the same thing, because the pains of weight cutting are still going to exist, even if her body doesn't go into emergency zone. All the same hunger pains, all the same dehydration pains, and every one of those pains, she's going to wonder, is this the fucking pain that's going to be my body shutting down?
Right.
So I think Shevchenko all day on this. My girl doesn't cut weight, which I think is going to be a big, huge style we start to see in mixed martial arts of our champions, that they don't cut weight. They kind of walk around at the natural weight class. What else do I have to say? Team Bullet.
So that's going to be, is that going to be a big DK play for
all
you?
Over. Every single card will have
Shevchenko. At 5-rounder, and she really gets her stride after that second round, mid-second round. She starts to land heavier because she feels you out for those first rounds. But I do agree. I got Shevchenko. I might even put a little bit of Nunes in there just because I could go 5 rounds.
I might have Nunes on a few.
Right.
Only with Shevchenko.
Oh, exactly. Like double them up because... And
I almost say you could take these last 2 fights and put all 4 fighters on one card and then just throw in whoever you can afford. Because I do think both of these fights could go to 5 rounds.
this is a coin flip of a fight with Shevchenko only being a minus 125
So
favorite.
she's the favorite right now.
Favorite.
That's all Lesbo and the Bean right there.
That is Lesbo
We're like
and
the
the
Brendan
Bean.
Schaub to
That is
Connor's
the heat.
McGregor. We've been talking about Shevchenko. We've been Shevchenko tit writers for I don't even know how long.
Too long.
I know, from the beginning.
Too long. I've been on that
Longer than
Valentina
Leslie Smith.
since I was a kid.
We've been on that Valentina. We've been telling you about the Shevchenko sisters. Follow them on YouTube. Her sister's a badass and a champion as well. So why not both sisters wear a belt? Queen of Dragons.
Moving on.
Don't know why I said that at all.
Because that's she embodies it.
She kinda
She's a
looks a
real
little
life,
Khaleesi.
yeah, the warrior lifestyle. Moving on to the main event, the headliner for this pay-per-view, we have Demetrius Johnson versus Ray Borg. Demetrius is definitely making a title or a history contention with this bout. If he wins, he has the most fights ever won, or most defenses for a belt. And I don't see where Demetrius loses this fight. He has the gas tank. He's gone 5 rounds more than any other fighter ever. He has the wrestling on the ground. He has the counter wrestling. He has the striking on the feet. He throws ton of good head kicks. Ray Borg, more power to him, because anybody who's given the title shot is going to say yes. And if you say no, you shouldn't be in there. You shouldn't be in the ring. So Ray Borg has been saying all of the right stuff. I've really liked what I've been hearing about Ray Borg, or listening to him being on podcasts. He has a fighter's mentality where he's like, no, I break down these fights nonstop, and he can actually announce a little bit. He really broke down Demetrius Johnson and other fighters really well, which I really like. I think Ray Borg is going to be a gatekeeper while Demetrius is there. If not, after this loss, he's going to take a huge step up in his level of fighting, and
He's the future of the division.
of the division for sure. But DJ is just, it's a little too much for Ray Borg right now, and I
have
feel
a
like it's a
question.
heavy favorite.
Do you think Tim Elliott exposed any holes in Demetrius Johnson's game?
No, because Tim Elliott was so reckless but contained that it's hard to just come out for someone that knows he has nothing to lose. And Ray Borg, even though he's not going to have that mentality, Ray Borg has more of the Mexican, I'm going to head down, get a shot on you, double leg takedown.
The only tape
grind
there
and
is to
pound you.
study is if there's holes in the tape. I agree with you. DJ don't have any holes.
And it was Tim Elliott just being a wild man, and being a wild man can work. It doesn't work all the time, but
Gaethje.
against DJ, that's what needs to happen. That's what needs to happen.
And
You need to
Borg's a
come
little
with
too
weird stuff.
reserved.
Exactly. He sticks to too much of a game plan, and a game plan for DJ, just we've seen the best of the best come at
DJ's
it.
going to be 11,000 on DK.
Yeah, he's going to be top of the top. And I see a finish coming.
And a finish will come. And even every round he doesn't finish, he's one of the only fighters that'll make up the point discrepancy by not finishing in that round by significant strikes landed.
Right.
So because of how many punches he lays per round.
Right.
So if he doesn't finish round 1, every round he doesn't finish, it's almost worth more points to you on DraftKings, which is so rare for to say about a fighter. Him and JJ might be the only two you can say that about.
Right. And DJ just he can throw 100 punches every round for 5 rounds. We've seen
Yeah.
it. There's just DJ.
He can get
Yep.
170 points. He can have reversals up the yin yang. He can have submissions. He can have leg
Exactly.
kicks. He has everything.
So definitely, I feel like who's going to end up giving you a lot of that is going to be, who was our Leslie Smith underdog?
So you can afford DJ.
Yep.
You are going to. I had turned off my. Why didn't I write
okay.
it down? There was somebody good that I was actually surprised that we were both going.
Wilson
with.
Hayes.
Yeah, Hayes.
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 Yep. So he's going to give you that DJ money.
Yeah, there it is. That's your combo right there, people.
Yep. So remember to follow us on Twitter.
At Lesbo and the Bean, and for all things Lesbo and the Bean, lesboandthebean.com.
Let's move the beat.